I've just been very fortunate with the number of things I've been able to do. I've traveled around the world that I never, kid from Monroe, let alone go to the White House, but go to Paris and China several times. I have been so lucky with all these different things I've been able to experience and never take them for granted, ever.
You know, Paul W., the hardest decision and the best decision.
Yeah, it was not easy because I'm in the habit of getting up at a ridiculous hour. I've never liked it. I have never liked getting up early.
Not
I've
a
even
morning
said
guy.
that to I'm not a morning guy. I'm a night guy. I'm a night owl. My wife, Kim, is a morning lark. She's up before me, and she gets up early on the weekend. I can't even imagine. But what happens is I start to do certain things that then all of a sudden it's 11 o'clock, it's midnight, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and I go, I better go to bed because I have to get up in 3 hours.
Yeah.
And I knew it was going to be hard when I first came back. People thought I was crazy. First of all, I was living on the East Coast. I worked in New York and Philly, and people said, "You're leaving here to go to Detroit?" Because Detroit didn't have the best of reputations. And I said, yeah, that's my home. I want to be there.
You grew up in Monroe.
I grew up in Monroe. And then when they said, you're going to take over for J.P. McCarthy, well, it was 11 months after he died. There's a long story attached to that. We'll do that on your next special.
All right, there you go.
So
I'm looking forward to that.
So I say, yeah, I love that radio station. I grew up listening to that radio station. Kids my age were listening to CKLW. I was listening to J.P. McCarthy on WJR. I loved this radio station then. I love it still today. But you get to a certain point. He died at 62. I'm 8 years older than that. I've done this show for 27 straight years. Nobody in the history of our 101-year-old radio station has ever done a morning show for 27 years. And I'm tired. And yet, the guys came up with another opportunity where we were going to seize back our time. 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. is prime time on radio. We were running syndicated shows. Not bad ones. Rush Limbaugh was one of them. He was the best. I used to fill in for him. It was an honor and a thrill. But it was a bigger picture for the broadcast of news and information that had very little to do with Michigan. We're going back to seizing noon to 3, I'll be noon to 2, and having Michigan-oriented information on. So it can be national and international stories in scope, but how does it affect us? Because that's what we really care about.
And wouldn't you say that in our business now, hyper-local community connection, that's what people want? That's what they want to hear.
In a market the size of Detroit, they deserve that. They deserve that. I miss that we have very few, although we're starting to get some, but very few local shows like Kelly and Company way back when and stuff like that. We deserve stuff like, we're a big enough market to handle that. But as you know, in the business, it's a lot cheaper to go to the satellite and run a show that's being sent to us by some syndicator or even a network or whatever. But yeah.
But 27 years, you are everyone's habit in the morning. And you've interviewed presidents,
every
heads of
president
business.
since Gerald Ford. Yeah. And I didn't think that was a big deal till they did the goodbye to Barbara Walters. And they said, and she's interviewed every president since Richard Nixon. I said, well, wait a minute. I had the guy right after Richard Nixon. So that's been good. Jerry Linenger, our astronaut, while he's up on the space station Mir on his birthday. It was broadcast on NASA television at the same time. And it was emotional for me. And I could see my words going up and getting to him. It would be a big delay. And then him speaking and the words getting to me. I've just been very fortunate with the number of things I've been able to do. I've traveled around the world that I never, kid from Monroe, let alone go to the White House, but go to Paris and China several times. And first broadcast, the first American full radio broadcast from Israel. I did that for a whole week. I did the first broadcast from the White House. Now they have Radio Row. I was the experiment. I did the 100th day of Bill Clinton in office all by myself out on the front lawn of the White House as the White House came together and woke up. It was very cool. I have been so lucky with all these different things I've been able to experience and never take them for granted, ever.
in growing up, you knew this was something that you always wanted to do?
Since I was very young. I grew up, my mother and dad, Marie and Bill Smith, rejuvenated something called the Monroe Community Players. So I was involved in theater. I think I played Winthrop when I was about 8 years old. And was that Bye Bye Birdie? No,
The Music Man.
The Music Man. Well, I was in Bye Bye Birdie, The Music Man, things like that when I was very young. And then when I was at Monroe Catholic Central High School, now St. Mary's Catholic Central in Monroe, the new little FM radio station came to the school and said, we're going to start broadcasting the games. We need somebody who can sit next to our announcer and fill in the gaps when it's getting slow or they have some time. And I was the natural because I did everything in school to stay out of class. I was first lieutenant of the band. I was a senior class president, or I don't remember what class I was in all the classes. I was in that hierarchy, and then the student council president at the end. So they said, well, Smith knows everything about what's going on. So I sat next to a guy and I described our team's socks or whatever they needed me to do at the time. I used to make the announcements in that little tin box that's over what used to be chalkboards. We used to have chalkboards. And it would be, run for your lives. You know, no one could understand what I was saying, but I did all the announcements for the day. And then it just naturally moved into radio. First show I did was called The Butterball Music Hall. And I used the popcorn theme. Bump, 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 bump,
Yes.
bump, bump. Yeah. That was 55 years ago.
When you think about the interviews that you've done here in Detroit, and I feel like CEOs come to you, the politicians come to you, they know that you'll be fair, and they also know that you're going to ask the questions that everyone wants the answers to. How has that, how have you shaped those moments, I think, on the radio, and what do they mean to you?
I'll tell you, Christy, what I tried to do has gotten me in trouble, meaning there are a lot of people who don't really pay attention to what I do, and they go, oh, he's a softball. It's all softballs. If they really listen to the interview, it isn't all softballs. But I ask them in a non-jarring way. I work into them in a conversation and get the same answers that anyone should be looking for. I think it might have been the Philadelphia Inquirer that said I had learned the art of disagreeing without being disagreeable. And why do I do that? Because I want all my guests to come back. I've never been out to get a big hit. Oh, I really put them down, or I made them look bad. I gotcha. Well, I still going to be on the air the next day. I might want them on again. So it's never been my way, my style. And by the way, I'm not a very good secret keeper. Kim can tell you if I buy her something. God forbid I buy her something for her birthday a week before her birthday. The
surprise is shot, right?
We're never going to make it to the week when her birthday, because I can't help myself. However, I've had even people like President Bill Clinton, who we weren't on the same team politically, but I liked him a lot. He was, well, I'll tell you that story. But I have secrets that he gave me, that he asked me about Kwame Kilpatrick and other things. I've never brought them up, ever, ever. And oftentimes I'll be told information and they say, please, don't say anything because we're going to reveal it whenever, whatever. And of course, I get screwed because the next morning it's the front page of the newspaper and I go,
right, you're like, wait, I knew this.
I knew this and you told me not to say anything, so I didn't.
Yeah.
So when I was asked to introduce President Ronald Reagan at an event many, many years ago, the Whistle Stop Tour on the Ferdinand Magellan, which is the only train that's ever existed with a presidential car on it, I did that, and when I met the president and shook his hand, that was the first time I met him, I thought, oh my God, I will never meet a more charismatic man ever in my life. I was wrong. And in fact, the next time I met someone in the White House who was far more charismatic, it was Bill Clinton. He just had charisma. Just when he looked at you and shook your hand, you knew that you were the most important thing right now. He wasn't like President Obama, who was always looking over your shoulders. Who's coming in here? Am I missing anybody?
Right.
Bill Clinton knew how to do
laser focus, huh?
Absolutely be focused and make you feel like you were special. He was something.
What's an interview that it stands out in your mind? Either it threw you off or it was the most memorable for you?
Mr. Rogers. I was a young kid. I had no kids. and I got an assignment for I had a daily live television show while I also had a radio show. This was in Toledo. And they said, Paul, we want you to fly to Pittsburgh and interview Mr. Rogers. And I go, great, who's that? And they said,
Fred Rogers.
Fred Rogers, you know, whatever. We didn't have computers. We didn't have a cell phone. We didn't have a vast, and I certainly didn't have a group of people doing research for me. So I say, okay, I'll figure it out. I do a lot of stuff on the fly like you do, Christy.
But we do.
And so I go to Pittsburgh and I go to public broadcasting in Pittsburgh. I go and I introduce myself, say I'm here to see Fred Rogers. And they say, okay, have a seat. I sit down, and I'm reading a magazine, probably sitting there, and a man comes walking up in a sweater and tennis shoes. And he says, are you Paul W.? And I'm thinking, oh boy, what is this? Who's this? I said, excuse me? Are you Paul W. and you're here to interview me? I'm Mr. Rogers. And I go, oh boy. What?
I did not prepare for this.
I don't exactly understand this. I don't exactly know what I'm supposed to be doing here. Would you like to come in the neighborhood? I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. I get up, I follow him, we go into the set. There's a train set going around a mountain, if I remember it, and a guy rides up on a bicycle, speedy delivery. And you have to understand, I don't know anything about this guy, and I'm going, what have I gotten into here? Yeah. This is just amazing. But I got to tell you, Christy, the end of the day, I felt I would never meet a man with more love.
Yeah.
I get a little emotional.
It's okay.
Kim says it's because I don't sleep enough. No. So pretty soon I won't be getting so emotional. But he was so full of love. He was such a sweet, wonderful man. I spent the day with him. We did a half-an-hour television show. I learned that he was an ordained minister. And this was his work, helping kids cope. Man, could we use Fred Rogers?
Oh, I know it. I know it. Yeah. Talk to me about moving forward now. Because this is not goodbye. This is just a shift.
It's so great. I've been in radio, I said 55 years, and I've watched people.
You make me tear up.
I'm sorry. I've watched people come and go in our business. And a lot of times when they go in broadcasting, it's not pretty. They just disappear oftentimes. People lose their job and don't find out until they got off the air. You know, they've just finished their show and they get off and they say, oh, by the way, that was your last show. There's a box over here and there's a guard who's going to walk you out. I've never seen anything like it.
This business is tough in terms of goodbyes or moving on.
I have gotten to the point where I'm just exhausted and I need to change that because I want to live. I've got good genes. My mother lived to be 97, 96. My grandfather, 100. I mean, you know, and I have a wife that loves me and that I love, and I've got children that I love and want to watch. My youngest 20, our oldest 30. And I want to be around. And on the path that I've been on the last 27 years, people say, I don't know how you do it. Well, guess what? I don't know how I do it. So the opportunity to be able to take a later in the day program, so I don't have to get up early, and that I'll feel like a human being, and it's 2 hours and not 3. I feel so blessed to be able to do this. And it's an important move for the radio station because for over 20 years, we haven't had good, locally oriented programming. Everything's been national because it was a syndicated national show. So I'm thrilled that they have that confidence in me. I'm thrilled that I didn't have to retire and say, guys, I'm out of gas.
All or nothing, yeah.
So I'm very excited about it. It's not something I haven't done. In fact, I used to do Focus years ago. I even did Focus from Philadelphia, believe it or not. And people would say to my parents, oh, you must be so happy Paul's home. Well, he's not really home.
He's over there
in Philly, but I was doing the show for WJR specifically.
Yeah.
And, you know, people have asked in the past, what about syndication and all that? I did on the ABC Radio Network, syndicated programming, but it was the worst thing I've ever done because back then they really believed you had to act like it. You couldn't say it was night or day because different stations would run it at different times. You couldn't even say if it was Tuesday or Wednesday because they might delay it a day. You couldn't say what a storm they had and wherever because It was terrible. It was not done the right way.
It took the connection out of who we were actually speaking to.
They wanted the listeners to think that I was really in Duluth on that radio station or in Bono, Ohio on that radio station. It took Rush Limbaugh to say, I'm in New York City and I hate it. But you knew where he was. And then he started doing a show in Florida, which he loved, but he didn't ever pretend he was here in Detroit. He was on in Detroit noon to 3, and we loved him, but he didn't pretend he was here. And that took that kind of sanitary kind of programming and made it very real. And he could talk about things like the news today or the bad storm or what bad traffic he was in or anything else. And I think that helped that kind of radio. I never wanted to be that sanitized in a syndicated radio program. I always felt Detroit was a big enough city, and it is, to have its own programming that was in Detroit, based on Detroit, or talking about Michigan and what's going on in Michigan. As long as we have that, I can broadcast from anywhere, and I will.
Yeah. You know what? Also, just hearing your voice is so resonant. I adore it. I hear it on Shepler's Ferry every time I go over. What do people say about your voice?
They ask me how I got my voice, and I don't think I can use the line that I used when I went into the National Radio Hall of Fame. Can I? Okay. All right. I need a drink of water before I do that.
Okay.
People ask me where I got my voice. They ask me if I went to a special broadcast school or any of that. I did not. I did not. So it came to a head because so many people have been asking me where I got that voice. Where'd you get that voice? And so at the induction into the National Radio Hall of Fame, there I'm in Chicago, standing before all these people. Larry King was our MC. And it came to me at the end of my speech, I said, people are always asking me, where'd you get your voice? Where'd you get your voice? And it just occurred to me that I now have an answer. I got my voice from my father and my balls from my mother. But it was true. She was a strong, strong woman.
You're a strong woman in your life.
My dad and I were never so strong. We were always doing things for free for people, and she'd say, you should be charging them. This is what you do for a living. You should charge them. She was right. She was right. She's the one who had the cojones that made me what I am today.
Yeah.
And the voice came from Dad. He had a great voice. In fact, we do a letter to a friend, it's called. We run it. I've run it all across the country, wherever I was, at Christmas time. We took this writing from a Fra Giovanni, and we turned it into our audio Christmas card to our listeners. It's really good. He did it in one take. My friend Luddy, Guy Ludwig, and I met at Michigan. He went on to produce Gene Shalit until Gene Shalit retired, and then Luddy retired. So for the Today Show. But yeah, we did that with Dad. You'll hear how great his voice is if we can. Yeah, we'll still play it around Christmas time.
Yeah, sounds good. Here's to sleeping in.
Here's to sleeping in?
Yeah, congratulations.
You know, somebody actually said to me, do you think you'll be able to?
You said absolutely.
Are you kidding me? Will I be able to sleep in? I'm not one of those people who's ever said, I don't even need an alarm clock. I just wake up when I need to. I use 3 alarm clocks to wake up.
Yeah.
To not turn those on is one of the things I've been looking forward to for 27 years, to just wake up when I wake up.
Yeah.
Now, this would be an extra special tape if I died tonight and then never wake up. And
Jeez,
you can go,
don't say that.
And then Paul W. Smith never got to wake up. And then he passed away in his sleep.
And then not even a 4th alarm could wake him up.
Yes. Man, he was tired.
Oh, jeez. Ladies and gentlemen, tip your wait staff, Paul W. Smith. He'll be here all night. Thank you.
Try the veal.
Try the veal. Thank you so much.